So Ligon, the last T4G.
Yeah. We knew it would come. We really started talking about that from the beginning.
Didn't come soon enough, did it?
Well, I don't know. The years have flown, actually, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
You look at some of those tapes of us preaching in 06, and the years seem like a long time ago. I'm thinking, was that my son speaking of T4G?
Well, that's true. That's true. I had hair and all sorts of other things, and a whole lot less weight. But I'm not sure I had a conception of how long we would go. I knew that it was finite.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how long people would be interested.
Yeah.
And more importantly,
I don't think we thought people at first would be interested.
Correct. But I think it actually ended up being helpful to people and encouraging. And that's what we wanted to be. The whole reason we did it is because we had enjoyed a friendship that was encouraging to us in pastoral ministry, and we wanted other ministers to enjoy that kind of friendship in pastoral ministry.
And CJ and you and I all complained about the same things.
We did.
We had the fellowship of insight.
We also enjoyed listening to John and RC.
Yeah.
You know, they were preaching heroes
that's right.
to us. And so the idea of being able to do something with them and bring together some folks that maybe weren't mixing.
Yeah. I was very pleased how many people met for the first time through the Together for the Gospel.
Yeah. So you had great guys from like Dave Doran's world, and then CJ's world.
Some New Jersey OPC dudes.
OPC guys. And, it was just a fascinating
Paul Martin
mixture.
From Toronto. Yeah.
And no, that was good. That was that was very different in 2006 than the kind of situation we're in 2022. So that was one of the, I was surprised and really encouraged by that.
Do you know that T4G became the largest meeting of Canadian evangelical pastors?
Somewhere along the line, I remember that being mentioned to us.
Interesting facts and statistics.
Yeah.
Little known about T4G.
They come south of the border to have their largest gathering.
It's like when you gather the Chinese pastors in Hong Kong. That's right.
So our goal was to encourage pastors and
praise the Lord for how
not to become some sort. We did not want to become a ministry. We did not want to become an organization.
This is one of the things that separated us from Gospel Coalition.
Right.
So strangely, you and I were both involved with Gospel Coalition from the very beginning.
Right.
T4G happened first, the conference, before they did a Gospel Coalition conference. And Gospel Coalition, filled with many dear brothers and sisters that we've worked with, has, I would say, consistently had a somewhat different philosophy of ministry.
Sure.
They're aiming more broadly, we're aiming very narrowly. They mean to have a big footprint, we mean to have a tiny footprint.
Right.
We're really just trying to have a conference to encourage pastors.
We wanted to be, as large as we became, we wanted to be unobtrusive in the church schedule. That's one reason we did it every 2 years.
That's right.
Because pastors are busy. They've got other stuff to do. They've got association meetings, or they've got presbytery meetings, or they've got, the various general conferences that happen in places.
First one, when we had over 2,000 people turn up, we were just covered up with ideas of people saying, "Oh, you got to do this every year. You got to start local T4G fellowships." We're like, no, this is an every other year thing. We want to encourage people to go to, MacArthur's conference and Sproul's conference and Piper's conference and lots of other good Man of Truth Minister conference. Lots of other good conferences that are happening. And you don't need to.
We weren't trying to compete with that or replace something.
Encourage the brothers.
Right.
Yeah.
We did think we were doing something because a lot of those conferences were going along and doing great things, but they didn't know one another.
Yeah, they were.
And we brought people together that didn't know one another.
Yeah, by God's grace. Do you think people understand what T4G is about?
Well, I think some people do. I think the people that have kind of consistently come through the years know what we're up to. They know where we're coming theologically. We tried to put that in very clear language in our affirmations.
Broadly Reformed.
Yeah.
Now, I'm about to meet in a couple of days with Scott Clark and Mike Horton and Bob Godfrey. Are they going to let me use the word reform? They're not going to let me use
They're not going to let you use the word reform. Of course not.
But you and I know.
And will it bother you one iota? No, it won't, right?
But we know what we mean when we say broadly reformed. We mean the sovereignty of God in salvation, and that Christ knew who he was dying for, And he's died for the same ones the Father's elected, and the Spirit then regenerates.
And they're different names. You know, John
Doctrines of
Piper will
grace.
use big God theology to talk about kind of what's happening out there. But we're not afraid to be confessional. All of us come from backgrounds where we are committed to confessional theology. It may be the New Hampshire, or it may be the 1689, or it may be the Westminster Confession, or it may be the Savoy, or something else.
articles.
But 39 articles. But we're committed to confessional theology, and we also wanted to say loud and clear that in evangelicalism in the 20th century, there had been the view that the only way we can get everybody together is to minimize the theology, dumb the theology down, really focus on mission. And we wanted to say, no, you ramp up the theology, ramp up the theological affirmations, and then celebrate that common affirmation of a robust theological presentation of the gospel.
Well, the Protestant mainline had going the idea, doctrine divides, mission unites.
Right.
And we were trying to go like, actually, no, if your doctrine is dividing, something's wrong. Because it's a doctrine that brings us together. We're together for the gospel.
That's right.
The gospel is news. The gospel is not fundamentally an ethic. Here's what you need to do.
The gospel is doctrine.
It's fundamentally a report. Here's what God has done, and an invitation, to join in.
And
just like we do with the Lord's Supper. We
and
invite
on
people to join
secondary
in as
issues,
believers,
we
just like
wanted
we do in baptism.
Well, speaking of which, on secondary issues, we wanted to say those things are not unimportant. And that's another thing that made us differ from a lot of evangelicalism in the 20th century.
We would bring up issues.
Absolutely.
Are there apostles today?
And so people today will say to me, oh, I love it when Mark is teasing with you about baptism. And
teasing?
I go, Mark Dever is not teasing
he may be
with
smiling,
me.
but he's not teasing.
There's no teasing at all. Mark is concerned for my soul.
I don't think it's a salvific matter, brother. But you are so kind when we talk about matters we disagree on, that it's problematic for me, because I have a lot of Baptists and one Presbyterian, just to be as kind as you are. They're not so persuaded on infant baptism, but they just think, wow, that dude is kind.
But we've wanted to say, in order to be together for the gospel, it does not mean that you need to treat those things as if they're unimportant. And in fact, one of the reasons I love the fellowship that we've had is because we all care about those issues. We actually think those are important for the life of the local church. They need to be taught to the people and put into practice in our local settings. And while we disagree on those, we can still gather together on things that we commonly confess and help one another.
Well, and I think the members of the Capitol Hill Baptist Church are better served if they know not just to trust Mark Dever as a preacher, but if they know they can turn to Lig Duncan, that they can listen to Al Mohler, they can go watch, John Piper, they can tune into H.B. Charles. There are lots of these speakers and preachers that they can learn from. I think we're healthier when we kind of cross-fertilize, even though, we do have areas we disagree on, and we can be clear about those.
And that, to be honest, Mark, that's an extension of your ministry. We always call you human Velcro. You're always bringing people together that you think will be helpful to one another and helpful to the kingdom. I've seen you do it since I met you when you were at Cambridge. And so T4G wanted to do that at a larger level and just bring people together. And again, not to whittle down their convictions, but actually pour steel in their backbones and some wind in their sails and make some friendships that will be helpful to them. And very frankly, sometimes it's nice to have some friends outside of your immediate ecclesiastical circles that you trust their judgment. They can kind of look into your situation and say, what is
With
going
a fresh
on?
pair of eyes.
And that's good for us. We need that. And we tried to promote that through T4G.
So for this T4G coming up, let's just let people know a little bit. How do we plan something like this?
Well, I mean, we start like 2 years ahead of time on every T4G.
Well,
I mean, you and I
organized started 4 years ahead of time by reserving space.
Matt's working 6 years ahead of time. But you and Al and I would sit down and at the end of the T4G and debrief and start thinking, what's coming up next.
So this time we had our meeting this past February in Nashville. And we were able to talk about some things there.
Right. But there was a lot of uncertainty.
Well, I was uncertain. there were things that I was concerned about that I was trying to do, and I think I was the one of the three of us who was feeling more pressed.
And Al was in the middle of the Southern Baptist Convention, the presidency, and all of that. A lot of things going on then. So when we got back together again.
Yeah, and so then we had an idea of some things we could do, and so we started moving forward on that. And then, the current things at SBC are blowing up at the same time. The World Magazine thing is going for Al, so then Al contacts us and say, brothers, I just, because of these other stewardships, I've got to go do this. And I think we both had a good bit of sympathy with that, thinking we can see that, and we were feeling a little bit the same way ourselves. But we can see this through for one more time.
And we just decided, okay, this is it. This is the last T4G.
And that, honestly, Ligon, that's kind of given me a sort
freeing.
It is. It's a kind of monkey off the back. It's kind of a joyful,
absolutely.
All right, we got one more shot at this.
Yeah.
Let's do it like this. Yeah. And I'm in some ways more excited about this one than maybe even the first one.
I am too. And look, you've already been pouring yourself through 9 Marks and the network and other things like that into young guys that are going to be leading their churches and leading movements in the days ahead. I want to do that too. There are young guys out there that I want to invest. I want to push them out front. I want to get behind the scene and support and encourage them. I had a conversation with a young guy just 2 days ago. There are young guys like Jason Halopoulos and Kevin DeYoung and who at University Reformed Church and David Strain. There's just some wonderful young guys that I want to kind of get behind them and push them out. This will give me space to do that. But I want to be together to sing, and I want to hear these guys, preach their hearts out one more time. I'm really excited about the last T4G.
Yeah, me too, brother. Well, I think the changes that we're making are going to be useful. The fact that we have the speakers that we have.
Yeah.
So while it is a loss not to have Al, it is, I think, positive to be able to have
Sinclair and Alistair, because there again, there's a long time friendship between a Scottish Presbyterian and a Scottish Baptist who've supported one another in ministry their whole life. From the time that Alistair was at Charlotte Chapel in Edinburgh.
Well, I think Alistair is nicer to Sinclair than I am to you. Wouldn't you say? I would say the Scottish
possibly
brethren, I would say the Scottish
possibly so
have been a real model for me that I'm going to try to aspire.
But Alistair really kind of cleared the deck so that he could come be with us, and I'm sure it's because of that friendship with Sinclair. And I want, our guys hadn't had a chance to hear Sinclair at T4G, and Sinclair doesn't like to attract attention to himself. He'd rather be in a conference with 150 people.
I know.
And he worries about his pride, and he worries about wanting to be in something, But we just said, look, you're going to encourage a lot of pastors this week. But I'm excited about Sinclair being there. I'm really excited about Alistair being there, and very thankful to Alistair to being willing. And we've had a wonderful friendship with Alistair over the years.
I've been at his basics conference,
and I get thrown together with Alistair all the time. He's spoken for us at RTS on a number of occasions to help me, and then just church conferences and things like that, and then through the Gettys, Alistair really tried to encourage Keith and Kristen, and I got to know them through Alistair. And when I went to Edinburgh, I wanted to go to Charlotte Chapel, where Derek Prime and Alistair.
I wanted you to go to Charlotte Chapel. Once again, we're together.
But Derek left. I think the first Sunday I got to Edinburgh, he retired, and Alistair by that time was, I think, already either somewhere else in Scotland, like in Glasgow, and then he went to Parkside. So that's going to be terrific. And David Platt is back too. And David, again, preaching on the subject that I love to hear him preach on the most, which is a biblical theological view of missions. And he preaches with passion and sincerity and conviction, and that's an emphasis we need to hear. We've gone through a decade or more where the very idea of the Great Commission has been, I think, eroded and under assault, sidelined. And so a very clear emphasis.
Well, that's one of the reasons I'm very thankful for some of the younger speakers we have as well. Because when you have Shai there with the new book he's just coming out with, Shai is going to get attacked for that book.
He will. But
he'll
guys
attack.
like Shai and Isaac Adams have spoken so responsibly
Yep,
on
I
that
agree.
topic.
I
Okay,
agree.
and honestly, in the past, there have been some things that you could give to people, but there was always but this, but this, but this.
Yeah.
This is the kind of thing
yeah.
you can say, okay, you can listen to this, brothers.
No, I've got some critics who feel I've been a big promoter of Divided by Faith, which I've not been a big promoter
Right.
of. I mean, I think our internship class used it a couple of times. I did have the elders read it.
Yeah.
And it's because of the historical section. We're trying to understand
Right.
some of the history, a good concentration on that. But the solutions that are
Yeah.
suggested is like,
Interestingly, my
faculty
faculty several years ago went to Mike Campbell, one of the outstanding African-American PCA pastors who's now in Miami, Florida. And we said, give us some books that we need to read just to kind of understand
Yeah.
the lay of the land. That was one of them.
Yeah.
But then Mike said to us, now, watch out, because the solution is vote Democratic on every, and that's not the solution. He said, all I want you to do is see through his eyes maybe some things that you haven't understood before.
Well, I think anytime you read a book that's going to help encapsulate the history of what's gone on in this country, and in a way that evangelicals can read and understand, it's going to be enlightening.
Right.
And so in our internship these days, we use a bunch of different books, including Frederick Douglass's autobiography.
Right.
And these new books by Shai and Isaac. And I'm having an intern this time read Owen Strand's new book, and one read Vodi Balkum's new book.
Yeah.
We're trying to get a
Read them all
wide
together.
spectrum,
Yeah.
and then like, guys, let's talk about
Absolutely.
this. What do we see that people are saying right? What's going wrong?
But I do think that the timeline that Shai lays out, I think is people there. I think their eyes are going to be open to how this thing unfolded when they read Shai's timeline of what's happened in the last 12
10
years.
Yeah, I agree.
Because I had sort of impressionistic things where I saw that, but Shai lays it out very clearly. And it's a book that I can put in people's hands. But he's not preaching on that. He's preaching the gospel.
Yeah.
And so I'm very excited about Shai being there. Yeah. And then Christian Lawanda is a brother that you met in Africa when you were preaching, and it really has become one of your favorite preachers.
Yes, and
from
he came
Africa.
to get our internship. I heard him preach a couple of times there, and then he preached for us once, and I just thought, like, one of the things I hope T4G can do as we kind of pass the baton along is just like we were able to, grab some younger brothers, like a Kevin DeYoung, and give away his emerging church book, and
we met him. He was there, like David, at the first
and Matt
conference.
Chandler,
But then we got the Why We're Not Emergent by two guys who ought to be, and looked at that and we said, okay, this guy's sharp, and pulled him on board and tried to introduce him to a wider constituency. We want to do that. And so, some people have complained, all these big conferences, all they have is well-known preachers. So we've tried to
we're
put
trying
really
this time
good...
To grab some younger guys that you wouldn't know as much and point at them.
Right.
And just say, hey, listen, we're going to be the well-known guys like the Sinclair and the Allisers, but we also want you to meet some
just
guys
like
that you
Ed
might not
Moore
know.
the last time. Ed Moore, I can't tell you how many people have said,
what a dear brother. Yeah.
Not a young guy,
No, but knew
but
a
a
lot of
faithful
people.
guy,
That's right.
really knew to and just blessed people with what he had to say.
Amen.
And so that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Bobby Scott's another one
Yeah.
who I met, I think, when I was out at a Shepherd's Conference the first time. HB knew Bobby. I knew him through a lot of the MacArthur guys spoke really highly of Bobby. I heard him speak at the TGC West Conference. Bobby's been at a conference with you and me before. I've been incredibly impressed with his insight and on some of the cultural things that we're going through right now. Really mature, godly, biblical approach to things. I can't wait for people to hear him.
The bookstore is also going to be there.
Yep.
And unlike some other big conferences these days, you're going to actually be able to buy 9 Marks titles at this bookstore. So there have been some conferences who have not allowed 9 Marks titles to be
You're
sold.
dangerous, Mark.
Well, it's just, the funny thing is, I think a lot of people have found the 100 titles that we printed to actually be very helpful in their churches. And they've gone to conferences, they haven't been able to buy them. At T4G, we're actually going to have them there.
Now, is that because we're woke?
Wokeness is in the eye of the beholder, brother. That's a word. I leave that one to you. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad they're there, Mark.
I'm glad they're there too. And I think, speaking of books, we're gonna give this to people who are registering.
Yeah.
They should be finding,
Like,
if you register early bird, which is before November 18th,
that shows up.
shows up in the post to you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Desiring God.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our kind friends
They've
here.
been
John's
incredibly
book on
generous.
Providence is so
Yeah.
good. They've been wonderful
Yeah.
partners in this ministry throughout. I mean, that's one of the things I'm not going to miss. I'm going to continue to enjoy just in
Right.
different forms. All the friendships and the partnerships that have been built between the various ministries. We always are given a list of all the potential books.
Yeah.
And we scrub through,
Yeah.
and we pull a lot of titles out. We leave some titles in.
We do.
And so massive amounts of these books are brought. And 10 of these is running the bookstore this year.
Which, by the way, is one of the reasons it's helpful for folks to sign up early, because it lets Matt know
That's right.
how many books to buy.
Do we need 2,000
Because
books? Do we need 4,000 books?
basically,
Do we
we
need
try and
6,000
take your
books? 8,000
registration
books?
and turn it into books for
That's
you.
right.
And because we've got some leverage, we can get a lot of books for you
Yeah.
for a lot less.
Yeah.
And basically, you get your registration costs
Well, and if
back
you do
in
early
books.
bird, you get a
lot more. You
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
And so that's a help to us, but we want to be a help. And look, that's why we go through that book list, so that you can be confident when you go into the bookstore, if there's something in there, it's actually going to be helpful to
Yeah.
you. You're not. It's
And
not. There's not something that a publisher has picked out because they're pushing it. It's because we've thought this will be helpful to pastors.
So one of the things that I talked to Mike Cosper about when I talked to him for the Rise and Fall of Marshall podcast thing he was doing, and we were talking about Mark Driscoll and T4G, and I said, well, Mike, one thing is I would just say we never sold his books.
Yeah.
It's not because we hate Mark.
Yeah.
We hope Mark's our brother in Christ.
Yeah.
But we just had our concerns about some things in his ministry. And so from
Yeah.
the very first one, 06, we've just never sold any of Mark's books.
Yeah.
And I personally told Mark that.
Yeah.
So he knew that that's what we're doing. I told him why we were doing it. So we're that careful with books.
Right.
I remember more than one T4G when I've walked in the bookstore and I've seen a book there and I've said,
And we've
okay,
removed it.
out. Those need to be out.
Yep.
And it's even happened with books by some of our speakers. But anyway, that's an even touchier topic. We'll move along.
We'll move
from
on with that
quickly.
one. Thank you. Why hadn't T4G spoken out on some of the tough topics that are kind of circulating right now?
Well, first of all, T4G is just an every other year pastors
Right.
conference. We're not the editorial page of Christianity Today or the Wall Street Journal or World
We're
Magazine.
issuing Protestant papal bulls.
No. There are other evangelical organizations that can try to do that. That's exactly what you and I have not
Right.
wanted to do along with those
Right.
organizations. So you can take your stewardship with RTS and do what you will. I'll take my stewardship with Capital Hill Baptist Church. I'll try to feed that flock through 9 Marks. We'll try to put out good material. But Together for the Gospel has never been about sorting out everything you could think about.
I think we've wanted to be relentlessly and faithfully biblical and theological in forming the ministry from the Bible, so that the gospel actually is driving how you do ministry. And we have wanted to resist polarities, extremes on either side that are sort of beckoning us one way or other off of the main things.
Okay, here's a tough question. Can you endorse all the talks and panels that you've ever given or been a part of at T4G?
That I've ever
Oh, yeah.
given or been a part of.
Yeah.
I think.
Okay, ask me the same thing.
Can you think of one that I've done?
From you?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Can you endorse all the talks or panels that you have been a part
I
of?
can endorse all my talks.
Okay.
I think I can think of at least one panel which things didn't go the way I hoped they would, and Al had warned me this would be the case,
Yeah.
and he was right.
warned us both.
And but there was enough good in the panel that I thought people are balanced enough; they're going to see through the problems.
Yeah.
That's again where I'm not.
Right.
I would treat the pastors more as adults, and I wouldn't be quite as quick to just cut things off. I'm like, oh no, let's listen as best we can to each other, even when we're disagreeing on things.
Well, I mean, I think you're talking about the MLK panel.
Yeah.
And it came right on the heels of the ERLC TGC MLK conference. I think it was looked at in that light. The other thing is, as you said, that was not the plan for the panel. The panel was not to be...
We're talking about churches today.
Correct.
50 years later.
And how did we miss a gospel opportunity as Bible-believing, confessional, Reformed Christians in the 1960s when we could have stood up for our brothers and sisters in Christ who are being unjustly treated? What opportunity, what do we learn from that? Not so much to be an exposition of MLK, but what did we miss at that moment? And what would things look like now had we been faithful?
And what are we missing
moment?
today? What can we capture today? And in that sense, I'm really thankful that T4G has always tried to say, hey, listen, we want to be leaning forward on issues of race.
Right.
We're not scared
Well, it
off
was
those.
in the affirmations and denials that we
06.
all signed in 2006.
Including
All of us
RC
signed it.
and John MacArthur and John Piper. So
and it's a
read
strong
Article 17.
statement. Please go read Article 17. You know,
And
it's
I
not
still
that was
stand
nothing
by.
new.
I'm
And
thankful
look, we
for
had
it.
a lot of friends that said to us, despite the criticisms of that conference, you finally followed through on Article 17. They said, we've been waiting for you to follow through on Article 17. And so we may have done it falteringly,
in
but
a flawed way, we're trying to be faithful.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm most excited for about T4G 22 is these younger preachers getting out there. And once again, we've been able to see, folks raised up, and we've been going at it that long. We can make this sound it's forever. It's 16 years. It's not that long. It's like, my goodness. We have dogs live longer than that. Anyway, over these 16 years, it has been great to see brothers who are beginning in ministry, who are now like in mid-ministry, moving on. And I'm hoping we can
Well,
see...
we were still almost young Turks, and now we're old guys.
Both are true. But I think if more people get a hold of Greg Gilbert, or if people who didn't know Juan or Afshin listen to their devotionals, or people get a hold of Bobby Scott, or
Christian Lawanda, or Shy. I mean, I think everybody appreciates HB, but those are guys that you're going to be able to listen to for years and benefit from.
Amen.
So I want to sing again. I mean,
I love singing next to you.
Hearing pastors just belt it out together.
Singing story. One time I'm at Legionnaires National Pastors Conference, standing next to RC, and we're singing. I think it was "Holy, Holy, Holy," and in the second stanza, he looks over at me, and he just slaps the hymnal out of my hand. Down on the floor. And he says, "You know the words." And so we just...
Which he would do to Jim Boyce.
Really?
Because Boyce would hold the hymnal in his hand on a mighty fortress. And he wasn't and Sproul would slap it out of his hand.
It's what he did to me.
And
Did he ever do that to you?
he's Mr. Memorization too. So...
but at T4G, we always have the hymns.
Well, they're in there. They are.
They're there with the
music.
music.
As well as up on the screen.
So you can take them home
and
actually teach them to your family and your congregation.
But I love singing next to you and harmonizing. And
second base with second base.
You probably spend as much. Well, it's true. It's you probably spend as much time as Bob or Matt on deciding what we're going to sing. I mean, you spend a lot of work
definitely
with them.
Put some in.
Would sing this, don't sing that.
I
mean, just like a bookstore, right?
I was doing that this past week with Matt Merker.
And it's balancing out the old and the new, and
tell them no, we can't learn many new things at a conference. Come on, we're trying to major on singing the things we know.
That's right. So and to model for pastors that are trying to teach their congregations to sing better.
Well, honestly, I think the kind of singing that we've done here has affected other conferences. I've seen it. I've had conference organizers tell me. And it's encouraged pastors to go back and simplify their music in their churches. And that's wonderful.
And
that helps
what
everybody.
Strikes you about T4G is not the instrumentation, the single piano, wherever it happens to be placed. It's that you hear people sing.
Thousands of people.
The voices. Ian Murray was struck by that.
That's right.
It was one of the things that Ian really reflected on in his time with us. And I think it's one of the absolutely unique things about T4G. And then knowing that a lot of those guys, if not most of them, are pastors. You just sing differently with pastors.
Right on.